Welcome to the Secret Art of Business. And today I am super thrilled to have Artie Isaac with me today. Artie, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Catherine. It's my pleasure.
You are a bit legendary in this community. I said it. And I think everybody knows you, which is why this is going to be such a great conversation because I think people would love to know your story. But we're going to do a little bit of a spoiler and go right to where you are right now before we build the whole story up. So let's talk about what you're doing now as far as being a coach for other business owners.
I do coach executives, people who are generally facing some sort of discrimination or are accused of perpetuating some sort of discrimination. That's my sweet spot. Um,
Oh, so it's just all
outs-
executives. They don't have to be a business owner. This is executives.
right.
All right, cool.
Generally, I apply myself to business, but it can be the arts and not for profit and
Cool.
elsewhere as well. Separately, I lead peer groups of sometimes business owners, sometimes hired CEOs, sometimes number twos or solo practitioners or not for profit executives. These are all different groups I'm describing, and they get together for a full day a month and ask each other questions, describe where they're perplexed, and give each other advice. And I serve as a facilitator, a convener. I think of myself as a theatrical director in an improvisational theater company. So I'm thinking of them as actors I'm trying to keep on stage, keep them listening, keep them uh, adding to the ideas they hear.
I absolutely love that comparison. That's really fantastic. Um, and the fact that you are doing this only makes perfect sense because when you did start out, you were in advertising and starting with Ogilvy and Mather. So that's like some old school name droppage I just did right there, where it comes to the advertising and Seagram's wine coolers with one of your clients. How did you get there? How did you get into like such a large company so quick?
Well, privilege. I I mean I had most of my life handed to me. I grew up in relative wealth. I grew up in terrific uh, teaching and education. I had some of the best teachers I can imagine. I didn't do the best work. I wasn't their best student, but I could say this: I disappointed a lot of teachers. Went to fancy schools and yeah. So the opportunity to work at Ogilvy and Mather, it happened at a time when they were deciding that they needed to match the MBAs on the client side. So they hired MBAs, and they hired me coming out of an MBA program.
I think that's really kind of cool on their part, for that matter, to get some young talent in there. Even if you happen to be handed this particular job, I mean, that's just, I mean, you got to take advantage of when you can, when the opportunity knocks, which is kind of cool. But also kind of woven in there too, you did some instruction too with like Capital University and some other places too. What was the draw to get into teaching?
I've always felt at home on a campus. I'm not a scholar. Uh, I appreciate the community of inquiry, and I found that I enjoyed being among students, and I enjoyed maybe as a way to better understand what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
but to understand my own subjects better, teaching them as a method of self exploration. I also enjoyed the ego gratifying aspect of audience and stage work.
Mm-hmm.
It was the teaching was a high point of my career, absolutely, and and the names you mentioned earlier, the brand names in advertising, seem very far away from me right now.
Oh,
It's been a long
absolutely.
time.
But it's sometimes kind of interesting to just kind of look back at some of that too and just be like, did that even happen?
It feels that way.
Exactly. Now, while, like I said, we did mention these large companies, you decided shortly after that, like maybe not so shortly after that, you wanted to start your own company, which you had for 17 years, which was Young Isaac. What made you decide to start your own business?
I was recruited by a local business titan. He wanted his son to return to Columbus. His son had been a high school classmate of mine. And so he reached to me in New York and invited me through a variety of methods to consider uh, moving back to Columbus. I didn't found an agency. I refounded an agency. Perhaps I co-founded an existing agency with Brooks Young and Tom Bedway, called Young Isaac Bedway, and then eventually Young Isaac. Uh, I, uh, I always preferred. I don't know. I've never been a business person, and
Hmm.
so owning something makes more sense to me than working in someone else's team. There are two things I don't like. I don't like being told what to do, and I don't like telling other people what to do. And so I had to choose which one was I going to do badly, which one was I going to neglect, and I chose to neglect teaching or telling other people what to do. So I decided I would rather own a business. That's how it looks in retrospect.
It's funny, and not an answer that I really expected, because when that question usually comes out, is because, well, I will say this: it's a lot of people, myself included, that didn't want don't like to necessarily be told what to do, or they think that they have a better way of doing it, or they like to have their voice heard a little more. I mean, that's kind of my path a little bit, because I worked for large companies, and it was essentially that. It's just like, I feel like I contribute more. Why won't you let me? But you had to kind of stay within this box. And it's like, well, if I could be, what if I could do anything? What if I could just have, not be reined in it at all? What could possibly happen? And my company kind of came out of that idea.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that a lot of entrepreneurs have that same sort of response, but yours is a little different. That you had actually a little bit of a catalyst to do it too.
Well, I'm not a planner. I don't think about allocating scarce resources. I'm again back to privilege. I've never faced deprivation, and as a
Hmm.
result, I don't. I'm not. Well, for me, that has resulted in not being very planful. So generally, when the phone rings and someone says, "How about this?" I'm game, even when it's as large as let's buy a company.
Yeah, I am a planner. My husband is not a planner. I think he thinks more like you do. So yeah, we have a lot of great conversations as a result of that. Okay. And we were talking about how, you use the word stage a couple of times. And in fact, you are what you are calling an amateur actor in community theater. Let's take an opportunity to talk about that a little bit. What drew you to that? Or you're just like, oh, fine, I'm just going to literally just get on a stage. So I got to get this out of me, sort of thing. So how did that come about? Because you've done that for a long time too, for 34 plus years.
I I was an actor in college and in high school, and then I wasn't for a long time. And Catherine, there's a much longer version of this story that I'll spare your folks, and maybe I could tell it on a side tape, and
The
you could
extended
link to it if
version.
you
Yeah.
want. Generally, my 25th college reunion reignited my desire to be on stage with a certain
Oh,
play,
wow.
a play that I'd been remembered for 26 years earlier. And I came back and I met the folks at Available Light Theater, Matt Slayball, and I ended up in about 4 or 5 plays. I wrote one. It was produced a couple years, and at this point, there are very few shows I would want to be in. I want to do a third production of that original play, Our Town by Thornton Wilder, but not yet. At some point in the future. Uh, but there's not much that would draw me back onto the stage. It ignites a set of symptoms in me that are I don't want to make light of this, but it's as if I have a drinking problem, and the reason I say that
Oh,
is because
wow.
it has nothing to do with alcohol. It's just
Uh-huh.
I have memory issues. I'm afraid. I'm out late at night. Um, I'm not. I'm not attending to my other priorities.
Hmm.
Um, being in a play for me is a lot like someone who has a problem.
That's really interesting. Interesting comparison. But I do need to know, was Our Town the play that you're remembered for?
Yeah, in college, it's the most produced play in
I
America.
think so, yeah.
Nothing new about it. But at the 25th reunion, many people commented on the production from 6 years earlier, and one person thanked me for doing it. I mean,
Oh,
the punchline is she said that when her 3.5-year-old son died, she had no regrets because what she'd heard in the theater that night 25 years earlier. So
oh my
that kind of
God.
stuff happened, and I came back from the reunion, and I thought I need to put this on the stage again, and Matt Slayball made it happen.
That's really, really cool. And the fact that you would have that effect on somebody is quite magical. So that is, and it goes to show you too how we are never sure how the arts will affect us too. Because I
Well,
mean, she probably would have never thought going to see a play would have made that big of a difference.
I can't speak to her intentions, but I can tell you my father came out to the college to watch that performance or one of those performances, and he came up to the stage afterwards, and he just said to me quietly, "Don't act." And I knew he was right. I hadn't learned my lines as well as I wanted to, and I didn't feel like I was compelling. And after that reunion, I called my mother. My father was long dead at this point. I said, "What did he mean?" She said, "Oh, he thought you'd be really good at it. He just he was afraid it wasn't a good way to make a living." And so sometimes we hear advice and we're not really quite sure where that advice comes from.
Oh, that is interesting. And now that you kind of mentioned about that whole lines thing, that's making me think too, like anytime I'm handed a script, like people say, we need you to read the script for whatever, it's almost impossible. I cannot remember a script. It's like, is there a teleprompter? Because I will literally not be able to remember this. And that's not always been the case. I don't know if that came with age um or just the discipline of it, but usually for me it's like, can I just wing it? Give me some bullet points and I will make sure I get whatever you're trying to get across. But if you want me to try to remember something word for word, I'll just forget it.
I don't know you well enough, but I can tell you that acting is an introvert's game, and
Oh, that is interesting.
yeah, most the great actors and comedians are really quite private people, and the reason I say that is because they prefer to have a script and to embody a different role.
Oh, that's actually very insightful. It explains so much. For me anyway, and maybe to someone else who's listening too. I need to ask because you did mention that you were privileged enough to go to some colleges, but you chose English, you got a BA in English. What was it that made you decide to go after that? And I know that you're an excellent writer, so was that something that drew you to that?
I got to college and they offered all these majors, and it was like the free spot in bingo because I didn't know molecular biochemistry and biophysics, but English, you kidding me? That's all that we get credit for that. So I thought it was like a game. You were supposed to pick the easy one. And in the end, my father was a writer and a reader. He had been an English major. I I'm not a reader, but I am a writer, and it just appealed to me. I thought, why not? I'm telling you, I'm not a planner, and so as a result, it wasn't it wasn't terribly thoughtful. Um, this is not inspiring. Um, with enough privilege, I could pick the easy path.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I automatically would kind of gravitate towards that too, because I think that the written word is fun, and I like writing, even if it's nonsense or just for myself. But yeah, just wordplay and all that sort of stuff is incredible. But I don't know if that's just because, again, that creative side of me is very strong within me, that I just like all that go. I mean, like well, I can use this as an example because my daughter and I will occasionally have conversations like about Taylor Swift and stuff like that, and because she's got them in that age group that she markets to, and I just tell her I just like the songs because of the words. I said I don't need necessarily hear. I mean, the music is great; that's a great add-on, but I think the words are fantastic. The poetry that goes along with it is really great. Like, how do you even rhyme some of these words? And so that's part of the magic that I find in it, is that it becomes an art form when it's done really well. You're either authoring books or poetry or things like that, which is actually a great segue because you do author books. And how many have you written, by the way?
I've written 6 books. 3 I've published. 3 are more private, not yet published, or
Oh my
maybe
goodness.
never to be published. I don't have any desire or impulse to share my work more broadly at this point. But 3 is the answer.
3 is the answer. That's great. And one you have with you that is your poetry book of dogs that 10 lucky people will get a free copy of. Maybe
Yeah,
9 because I think I want one.
sure. Okay, so for the first 9 respondents to Catherine with their postal address and their name, I'll send a free copy of Throw Me a Bone, Poetry for Dogs. It also sells at the Columbus Museum of Art and out here in Yellow Springs at Epic Bookshop.
Oh, well, there we go. Because I just love the idea of it, to be perfectly honest. So I'm going to get it regardless. But yes, I will have all the details in the notes to this podcast, and then people can just DM me, and we'll get those. We'll move some paper for you, and if nothing else, you can give it to someone as a gift or buy more, because now we know where to get more. Because I bet you they would make awesome gifts for people that have dogs. So that's super cool. Okay. We're going to go back a little bit further because we talked about your college life and your early career. When you were a kid, Artie Isaac, what did you do for fun?
I was relatively solitary. I'm an introvert, if that is such a thing. I prefer to be alone. I prefer to recover in solitude, and so I spent a lot of time alone. I had friends, and played baseball down the alley at the Aldridge's house, and I've I generally remember coming home from school and eating ho-hos, drinking Hawaiian punch, and watching Gilligan's Island. And
Oh my God.
I feel like that level of nutritional content is what made me what I am. I what else? I was taught early in life 3 skills that have served me really well. Writing, as we've talked about, also improvisation, um, and cheerleading. And the 3 of those are the skills that I still put to work today.
Yes.
That's what I've always been, those 3 things masquerading as something else.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And that definitely talks about, how, we do find our path when we do revisit some of those things that we did as kids that were our true passion, before we had a responsibility. It's like, well, because then it's like, because I asked people on occasion, if you could have the whole day to yourself, what would you do? And they would start mentioning things like, oh, I'd run some errands, or I would, it's like, no, you don't get to do any, just the whole day to do whatever you want. And it can't be chores or things. And people get kind of stuck. They're like, I don't know what I would do with my day. So that's why it's really
That's
great to kind of peel back to get to your childhood. And then
Yeah,
you're like, well, what did you do when you didn't have any responsibility? And it was like, I would write, and I would, do things like that, or I would ride bikes, or it's funny. Like, some people said they would spend hours on the swing, and I'm like, well, what if you did that now? And they're like, oh my God, that would be so awesome. So, I love
yeah.
that you were actually able to pull that through and make an entire career for yourself.
And these days, I do only what I want to do. I mean, this conversation is something, if I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't do it. And
Oh, thank you.
well, but there's nothing like when I convene my peer groups, my attitude is, thank you everyone for coming to visit me on my day off. I don't, I don't do the attributes that people describe in work when work is labor.
Mm.
I don't. I just. I'm really lucky. I mean, when we talk about privilege, I'm really lucky in that I'm really only doing those things that maybe only I want to do.
Oh, I love that. But I think that's also a great example. People might think that that's, just a little too carefree way of thinking. But I think it's really how we should really approach things. I'm not saying that every day is going to be, I only want to do this sort of thing. Because sometimes you'll get a day in business where you're like, well, this is work and it's not fun. But if we get through this, then we can have fun again. But why people would subject themselves to a lot of pain and suffering by their own choice for the most part is a little shocking. I mean, we're kind of conditioned to do that as,
Right.
Americans or the hardworking group or what have you. And you're missing out on a whole lot when you think like that.
Absolutely. The idea that work is hard, and I'm not digging a ditch in the hot sun. So
No,
I
there are
have to,
people that are
I
actually
think,
good at that, which is,
yeah, I was on the top of a building a couple of days ago in a town with tall buildings, and I saw, and I was eating breakfast on this terrace, and the window washer was letting himself over the edge and disappearing from view and
Ugh.
coming back behind me and doing it again. And he and I, engaged in some sort of communication. Um, yeah, I don't know what the hard workers are doing. I'm
Well, like I
writing
said, but
poetry
sometimes
for
it's
fun.
self-inflicted. Like I said, I see people that are in construction and they love what they do. They can't wait to get up on a girder or to dig a ditch, or because they like being outside and they like the freedom to kind of have that control. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to keep you in business because I'm not going to do that. And hopefully I
Yeah,
can help you in some other way.
I hope you're right. I hope they enjoy themselves. I don't particularly imagine that that's the prevailing
Not
attitude on
for
the whole.
everyone. Not for everyone. Like I said, it's very hard work, and I have had some of those jobs because I was not from a family like yours, and yeah, it was drudgery. But again, I get to look back on the days that I waited tables or I worked in a factory, and just say, yeah, I did that. It was a lifetime ago, but it
Yeah,
was a part of my growing up.
sure.
And
I've been in my growing up. I've been a bartender and a lawn cutter and a paper boy and uh, a taxi driver and a dishwasher in a steakhouse, and then a vegetarian. And so I worked side by side with people who didn't get to just visit those jobs.
yeah, that
Um,
was their job.
and
Same.
and I heard them say to me, "Keep going,
Yeah,
get out, keep going."
yeah, and but I do really believe, and it's really hard to explain to some people too, because that time for them is every dollar is precious. Every minute that they put in is, they definitely need that money, but to hopefully find some sort of joy in that is kind of key. And what I like to tell people too, and if you can't find it in your job, when you're off duty, try and find it, because
Sure.
that'll get you excited. Well, I shouldn't say excited. That'll get you motivated to get out of bed to get to that job that may not be the best, where you want to be. But if you spend time with your family, if you spend time, like I said, maybe just after work of, hard day work of doing dishes, you sit on the swing for an hour. That's a real good way to kind of clear your head and be able to just keep going and figure out where you need to be. And if that's it, then at least you had some moments too that were awesome too.
A
It's
classic text on this subject is called "Finding Flow" by Mahai Csikszentmihalyi,
yes.
and your listeners and viewers might appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely check that out. And I have found, like I said, while there was a lot of, you know, hills to climb on my path, because I had to put myself through college and I had to, work the hard jobs, the dirty jobs, but you did some too. And but just kept going. It's like this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. And a lot of that comes just from creativity and innovation and just kind of looking to see what else I can do, where else I can contribute, where can I take these skills and do something that's kind of cool that's next. And the fact that you have had so much change and evolution in your career leads me to believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you've always kind of looked for kind of the next, kind of what else, what, this is a shiny object over here, let me just kind of try this. I mean, is that true, or did you
Well,
just kind of
it,
fall into things?
it's true without the aspect of planning.
Okay.
Almost everything I've ever done has been suggested to me by someone else,
Oh, interesting.
and then I don't research it. I try it and reflect on how it feels and whether I'm any good at it and whether the world needs it, whether I can get paid for it. The various aspects of ikigai, I think it's called, and that's been a very natural reaction. But again, not facing deprivation enables me to I don't know,
Take a risk.
joyride through life.
Yeah, but regardless, that could have just kind of put a nice sugar coating on you to just like, well, let's just try it,
Yes,
because you're not familiar with what could possibly go wrong.
right, right.
That's really cool. And I'm going to just put a little point on the fact that you said things were suggested to you. I'm a huge fan of approaching people when you see something in them. It's like, you know what you should try, or you know what you should do. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of comes along in your coaching too. So do you find yourself offering those sort of suggestions for people too, like those opportunities that were suggested to you? Have you thought about doing this, or does that ever come up for you?
It comes up when I'm so in a coaching session. I try to stay a coach, which is curious. Every once in a while, I slip into different roles, like mentor or consultant or friend or something else. And so when I wear those other hats, sometimes I can't help myself, and I do that. But at my best, when I'm a coach, I'm not suggesting anything.
Okay. Do you prefer people just kind of come up with it on their own? Like
Well,
do that self-discovery?
that's what the International Coach Federation calls coaching. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
That offers some clarity on the difference then.
yeah, yeah. And I, sometimes people need me as a mentor or benefit from it, or a consultant or a teacher. I'm not a therapist, right? So I know
That's, are you ever a therapist?
I know when to refer out for that. Um, Sometimes they want me for, some expertise that I had or have. And I just try to make sure I'm aware of which hat I'm wearing. So, um, I've got plenty of suggestions for everybody if I, no, but nobody really needs them.
I like that. Well, I like that too because you don't want to necessarily be responsible if you lead somebody astray either. It's like you told me to try this and it was a train wreck. But uh, I love that. I love that you are serving more as a guide than as a suggester. I guess if
I
that's
think
such a is
I,
that a word?
yeah, so guide's a great word. But I think I prefer, as I think about it, I'm more a person in the back seat, asking, where are we going?
Oh, I
I'm not,
love
I'm,
that.
I'm not, I'm not navigating, there's this aspect of coaching called co-creation. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, your listeners and viewers might like Marilee Adams' book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. It's, I'm very much, I mean, what I'm doing right now is not generally how I spend my day. I generally don't uh, tell my story and suggest that it has any implication for somebody else.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so we'll definitely get that in the notes too. So do not use this as a guide for your own life. This has only worked for Artie, and
Right. Well,
your results may vary.
but here's right. But here's why. My life makes great sense in retrospect.
Yeah, it
In the
does.
living of it, it drew a lot of questioning from us.
Yeah, but again, that's why it's kind of fun to look back and just say, okay, that was a good idea, or that was not a good idea. But it makes for great storytelling, which I think is again with words and fun and creativity and things like that too. So that's always one of my favorite things too, is to hear people's stories, and I appreciate you sharing yours. And I have only one more question: is what's next for Artie Isaac? What are you going to do?
Well, that gets terribly close to planning. I, I,
I forgot.
I don't know. I don't know. I can tell you that right now I have a variety of aims. Uh, I want to help writers see themselves as writers. So I'm working with a variety of writers um, to get them to a stage where they say to themselves, I am a writer. I'm building boxes, frames, and benches out of wood.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
I have an aim of empty basement, empty attic. My mother left me an empty basement and an empty attic, and I really appreciate that. And so I'm 64 years old. I'm very conscious um, about clearing the space out here. Um, I'm very much in love. Have a one of my many privileges, 35 years of marriage with
Oh,
Elisa. Um,
congratulations.
so that's something. Um, I live out here in Yellow Springs, and so one thing I'm doing is I think I'm receding from the world. I'm not doing interviews. I mean, this is fun and strange. I'm trying to be known by fewer people, and closing my circle around me a little bit. I'm actively, maybe this is planful. I'm actively recreating a scoreboard. So I find a lot of people in the third of life who are all playing all out. and that's very inspiring. However, they're looking at the scoreboard from the second third of life. They're reliving the second third of life, and I don't want to do that. I've created a scoreboard for the third of life, and it involves me somewhat receding from the world. I can send that to you. You can share that with your
I would
tribe.
love to see it because, I mean, I'm not that far behind you. I mean, there are a few years, but um, I'm looking at, my life in the same sort of segments too. And, I'll get to your age and I'll probably pull that out and just say, okay, what do I still need to do here? I definitely need to clean up my basement though, and not leave that to my daughter though. So that might be top on my list. Artie, thank you so much for talking with me today and with my listeners. I have always been an admirer of you, and like I said, you just feel like you've kind of fell through this, but I think fate might have pulled you a little way by you just being kind of true to yourself and just what you wanted to do. And I think there's a lot to be said for that because sometimes people feel like they have to do things, and you're a living example of no, you don't. You can do what you want to do too. If you're not privileged enough to do it all the time, try and do it some of the time.
Wonderful. Appreciate your insights, Catherine, your questions, your curiosity, and I love that you're bringing different voices to your listeners. Thank you for including me.
Thank you.